What's up, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. So today we have Hunter Z over here that needs a 120K timing kit. Sorry for the halo, but we're actually going to be doing something a little different with this video. I got a chest mount from one of you guys actually, and I'm thinking, why not do a POV 120K timing kit? Sounds cool, right? I also want to do kind of a short on how to set the tensioner and the belt or whatever, because that seems to be real confusing to a lot of people, so I want to kind of clear that up and help some of you guys out. As always, we're going to start with the radiator. There's a drain plug on the bottom. Take care of that. I actually believe we have an undershield here, so I understand POV is not going to be optimal for all of this, but I trust that you guys can use your own judgment to get the little extra bits, like draining the radiator and pulling that undershroud off, which is only like 6-10 mil bolts. So let's go inside, let's grab our chest mount, and let's get to work. So now that the bleeders pop down below, we're just going to open the cap to help the flow out, because if you don't, it'll just slowly drip. So now we're going to remove both of these radiator brackets and begin to get it to where we can lift this radiator out. Pro tip, put everything back where it came from, hardware wise, and you won't have to worry about where it goes. Since the coolant's dropped enough, we're going to pull the overflow. It does have a couple spots where it clips to the actual radiator shroud, so you want to make sure you get them or it's going to get hung up when you go to pull your radiator out. Now that the fluid is officially down past all the fins, we're going to pull this upper hose and pull it. In case you didn't know, these zip ties are actually reusable if they have the little tab on them. Just pull the tab up, slide it out. I believe we're good to go ahead and pull this hose off now. The radiator has stopped dripping, although I know that that's not all the fluid that's in this thing. Oh yeah, I forgot. We're replacing these with brand new silicone. A little tip for me: when you remove your lower radiator hose, put the upper hose on that outlet pipe, so that way any coolant, flows out of it and wants to drip on the ground will stay stationary in this. We're going to begin to lift the radiator while leaving it all hooked up. Lower hose and everything to mitigate the spillage. I know you can't see it, but the biggest holdup is usually getting that lower hose to not get stuck on the fan. And down here on the side is where those two overflow hoses actually clip. Next step is to grab a 10 mil ratcheting wrench, and we're going to remove this fan. A magnet helps get all those pesky little crush washers off. Wiggle your fan and pull it off. This part's totally optional. You can just chop all your belts if you bought some, as we're going to be replacing all of ours. Loosen your tensioner and idler down there with the 14 mil. Untension it with the 12 mil underneath. Then you can remove your AC. The alternator one's pretty easy. You'll just pull off the actual pulley here, but there's a 12 mil on the back to loosen that. You also have to loosen the 17 mil nut, and then you got a 12 mil tensioner. Here you got a 12 mil nut and a 12 mil tensioner on the side. So let's make quick work of this, because I'm down to 30% battery and I'm probably like 3 minutes into this video. We got the belts off. Now what we're going to tackle is removing this crank pulley. So if you have an automatic, I recommend putting a breaker bar on the 27 mil bolt and wedging it underneath your tension rod bracket or the frame rail of the car, bumping the starter and allowing the torque from the starter to actually loosen that bolt. If not, you're going to put it in 5th gear, chock your wheels if you have a manual car, and we're going to crank it off. And even if you're a manual, using a breaker bar with the jack handle will help you out significantly, because leverage is your best friend. Silly me, you got to chock behind the wheel. Derp! Once you get her loose, take a ratchet and remove it the rest of the way. Big test, is this pulley going to come off? Nope. So we're going to need a steering wheel type puller to remove that crank pulley. They're like 20 bucks at Harbor Freight. Generally, I never recommend this, but right here we've got us a 3-jaw puller, and since the Z has been well taken care of and stored inside, I'm going to use this because I know it's not going to be seized on. The reason why you don't want to use these is usually your crank pulley is extremely stuck and it's not going to come off easily, so you'll actually break the crank pulley ribs trying to pull it off. But it appears I've left mine at my other shop and am out of luck. Once it's loose, the crank pulley will shake on the snout. Just make sure your bolt's loosened all the way to allow it to come out. like that. Be sure not to lose your woodruff key. It usually doesn't stay in the pulley, but just make sure that your woodruff key is not wedged in there, whammed. And well, it's definitely stuck in that keyway. So we're gonna leave it there for now, but now we're gonna put the crank bolt back in so we can actually turn it as we need to. We're gonna start to begin to remove these timing covers. 5mm Allen key is gonna do about all you need here, and then you'll need an 8mm to remove these smaller bolts. In this case, we're gonna pull our intakes off just because they're kind of gonna be in the way. I may not fully remove them, I'll just kind of pull them out of the way, mainly so we don't have to worry about breaking any of our hoses. We're going to disconnect both of our coolant temp sensors here in the front. You can fully remove your PTU if you want, but I'm just going to disconnect the connectors to it and leave it mounted to the timing cover. Pull this all out the way. And we're going to remove this little push tab so we can slide this little mechanism off of this bracket and then pull it over out the way. Now we can remove our crank angle sensor connector and pull off these covers. All I gotta say is big shout out to whoever stripped this bolt out underneath the intake on the last timing service, because you made my life not so fun. Thankfully, we got it out. So the holdup was actually this bolt got stuck to this 8mm, so it pulled out, and it's the shoulder bolt that actually goes behind the cover. Now I'm going to remove all 6 bolts to the lower timing cover, so I can remove that separately without pulling this upper one, so I can crack the water pump loose to let all the coolant out and not have to worry about spilling it all, doing it like 3 times. Sorry for not showing everything here. We're actually just going to pull these pipes out. We're actually getting some roads done like right behind me. So I got the 3 bolts loosened for this. All it takes is just to crack it loose. So we'll let that drain out, and then once it drains enough, we'll pull the upper one so that doesn't make a mess, and then we can remove that lower timing cover. We'll move these hose clamps, and we should be able to crack this loose. Nice. Another pipe down. Looks like our shoulder bolt's doing the same thing on this side. Pull the threads, Batman. And last but not least, timing cover number 3. Before we do much of anything, let's crack all 6 or 7 12mm to our water pump. Now let's begin to kind of bleed that all out so we can get all of the coolant out of the system. My tip to you, only do like 2 full rotations on all the bolts on the water pump, so when you go to knock it loose that you can actually drain the coolant without it all just water falling out. The reason I say to leave it is because you can lift it and adjust how much coolant comes out. And doing this, you don't have to worry about popping your thermostat out and making a total mess of everything. Now, once all the coolant's out, we're going to put our ratchet on tighten so we can tighten up this crank bolt. We're going to spin it around so we get all of our cam gears lined up with top dead center, which there's marks on the back to kind of get a rough idea with the dimples on the cam gear. Before I remove the tensioner, I'm going to just remove this cast and cast bracket. Make sure you don't pry on the actual edge of the cam gear itself, because you can bend the lip of the exhaust cam gear. Finally, just reinstalling the tensioner bolt so we can gap the tensioner. You don't have to put the tensioner bolt back in. I'm just doing that in case I need to throw this on a motor or something for like a minute, you know, to test stuff. Basically, it'll just help me in that process. Bam, the tensioner flop. So satisfying, to me at least. Then we can slide the tensioner off. Yay. Let's test that. It's a little worn out. Shouldn't be able to hear the bearing, and it theoretically shouldn't be able to spin that much. But now the belt has already started doing it on its own, but you can remove the timing belt now. And ideally, keep this belt, not to reuse it, but we're actually going to use it to tighten down the cam gears. At least the intakes, that is. I'm going to show you guys how to do that in this video, even though I did a short on it itself. Usually I say to put a 10mm right in between the gears to use for leverage, or to take the intake valve covers off to use a wrench on the cam itself, but not necessary. We're going to grab our impact and an 11mm socket, and we're going to zap these exhaust cam gears off. They're only like 12 to 15 foot-pounds as well. Hopefully you can wiggle the thing off if it hasn't been exposed to too much moisture. So this one shouldn't have been. There we go. And pull that off. I didn't I didn't show it, unfortunately. Forgot. But basically, the driver's side cams are at resting at top dead center, so they actually move. But over here, if we move this, it's going to snap all the way one way, because you can see the timing mark is down here instead of being up here. It's because when we loosened it, it snapped the valves shut. So the passenger side, some valves are open at top dead center. Don't worry if they snap one way, you can just move them back. Just be careful not to get your fingers wedged in between, because these gears are metal and they're very stuck and stagnant, so you will tear the skin on your finger and be in for a tough one. Now for the intake cam gears, you're going to need a 7mm so you can remove these VTC caps to get access to the springs. Now some oil will leak out of these, just a heads up, so if you have to, put something down to catch the oil. Now consult the belt wrap technique from later on in this video if you don't know here to get these off. I'm going to use an impact because I got the tooling, so why not use it? I do want to apologize in advance for anything you guys may not be able to see, because I can't really see the GoPro and I know it has the tendency to point downwards and angled. Just throw a rag behind it because it's full of oil. I'm going to try to grab my hat mount at my mom's house when I go to get my hair cut here in like 2 hours. Got to ship a couple things out, so I'm going to try to. I just haven't been wearing hats much lately because it kind of hurts my head after a while. Okay, we're going to grab a 14 now so we can crack these loose and replace our idler bearings. One down. And this right here is a big reason why I bought this impact. It's because it makes stuff like this go so much faster. Definitely not a crazy fan of this hat clip because I can't see anything. The GoPro is like right in front of my eyeballs. Let's grab a 10mm. Let's pull this rear cover. Stuck. RTV from the valve cover gaskets. So I recommend these Lyle shaft seal puller type tools. As long as you can get in there behind that lip, you want to grab onto the metal portion. Okay, I forgot. We got to pull these things off because they're getting in the way of my prying. 2 10mm, pull it off, transfer these over to your new bypass hoses, and reseal. And I just realized this GoPro being so close to my face, you guys are probably hearing every time I breathe, and I breathe stinking loudly, so I apologize. And we're going to do that with all 4 of these cam seals, and then a crank seal. So let's just get this done, because this sucks, and we'll be back. So we got them all out, and you want to go back with a rag, make sure you wipe any like debris out, because those seals do disintegrate when you use that puller, especially if they're old and really brittle. I actually used a flathead screwdriver on the last one because I busted my knuckles way too many times. But just be careful not to score your cam, because if you do that, then you're probably pretty screwed. I'm actually going to throw a little bit of oil on the outside of these cams, at least the exhaust, to kind of clean up that rust a little bit. Cut open our new seal pack. Pretty poor seal job. Got the actual seals and the heat shrink, or the heat seal, whatever. So basically they usually send you crank seals. They're exactly the same diameter or size, but the crank seals actually come with grease. That grease is on the inside, so it's right where you need it. Just be careful not to fold your lip over while installing it on your cams, at least on the exhaust. And I found twisting it helps to verify that it's, you know, evenly seated and on properly. Now I know one of you guys makes some seal drivers for these things. I keep forgetting to reach out, but basically what I've always used is an extension. I'll just kind of walk my way around the seal, tapping it in, and I use this to get it flush with the cam cap and the head. So basically you don't want it to be recessed at all. Once it's all flush, you can feel it flush, and there's no rolled lip on the seal, you can kind of angle the extension in a little bit to get it perfectly flush, and you're good to go. So let's do the other 3, and then we can move on to the crank sprocket itself. So we went ahead, we put the covers back on, we kind of cleaned them up, and while we're here, we're just going to put on these idler bearings, and they're going to be torqued to 32 to 43 foot-pounds. I always do like a solid 40, and you really don't want to put too much stuff on, you know, like your water pump, just in case, because pulling that cam seal, not cam seal, but the crank seal can actually be pretty annoying if you got too much stuff in the way. So realistically, we might have to pull this back off, but we'll see if it comes out nicely. So now we're going to remove the bolt. We're going to remove this timing belt washer or guide, and then we're going to attempt to pull this gear. It doesn't seem like it's going to be easy. We might have to cut it off, unfortunately. You can also drill and tap on each side and use the same kind of steering wheel puller that you used for the crank pulley to pull it off. I don't have the time to do that. I just prefer to cut it. It takes like 2 minutes. The smaller the cutting wheel, the better. Basically all we're going to do is... So I couldn't get this Woodruff key out, unfortunately. Granted, it's not the biggest deal, but basically we just want to get that cut down into the keyway as far as possible. Since I kind of bent this rear washer trying to pry it off to see if it would come off, which I don't recommend because you can actually crack your oil pump housing. Then we're going to grab a big hammer and a chisel. Usually there will be an audible change in noise once it does crack, but I really need to figure out how to get this Woodruff key out, so let's kind of soak it with some PB Blaster so I can actually cut further down into this cam or crank gear. Kind of trim down into it a little bit more. You hear that? The sound totally changed. Yep, I can see the split now for sure. We're gonna need a little bit of PB Blaster. Looks like even for 59,000 miles, this thing has a little bit of crust to it. Not only are we gonna spray it down in the split, but kind of in the Woodruff key area. I guess we're just gonna keep putting pressure on it. There we go. Oh yeah, that's rusty. I swear, anytime the GoPro's out, nothing goes my way, but as soon as I put it up, everything starts working for me. Add her to the scrap pile. Pull off this junk rear washer since we bent it up a little bit, and then we can pull our crank seal. It's not terrible, but not ideal. Don't want that rubbing into your belt. When it comes to installing your new crank seal, when you get the seal started on, I recommend grabbing your phone, going down and making sure you do not fold any lip on this thing. Also, do not lubricate the outside of it because that is what actually grabs into the housing. Kind of like this, I'll record it as I look, and then I'll go back and double check the video, say using Snapchat as it plays back. Get that bad boy nice and flush, and then we can reinstall our backing plate, lube up and tap on a new gear. Start to begin to put the rest of the belt system on. And when you go to install your new crank gear, I always recommend oiling up the crank, not only to help it go on, but to, you know, help it to come off next time. Definitely would have helped, but granted, I think that this thing is factory and it has never been off before. Make sure your flat washer goes on the back too, as well. Doesn't hurt to throw a little bit of oil inside the gear itself, sprocket, whatever for you technical guys. And make sure the indented side goes to the rear because there's no timing mark here on the back of the gear. When it is tough to go on, having your first Woodruff key in is pretty much required because it helps keep it straight so it'll connect to the rear Woodruff key. Send it on. Now that that pesky thing is on, we can start to, you know, glue everything back on here. And you know, I used to struggle with this whole surface prep thing, using a razor blade, then going back with a wire brush because I thought about it too much. I really overthink everything that I do. You pretty much don't want a perfectly smooth, perfect surface for RTV to adhere to because it needs something to kind of grab and bond to. So what I've started doing here the past couple months is I take a wire wheel like this and I make quick work of this. Instead of spending an hour doing all this, I may take 2 minutes. And I already did this all up here in one pass since we put these covers on. And we make super quick work of it. You want to be a little careful on aluminum not to sit in one spot too long because you can kind of eat away with it, especially if it is a steel brush. If it's brass, it's fine. I know there's always that one guy, oh, you're getting stuff in the motor, blah, blah. Well, that's why recently I've gotten this cheap little air compressor. I can blow all that junk out. If you don't have one, I just used to use brake cleaner to rinse it out, and yeah, easy enough. I may have to pull that idler off. That's why I say kind of wait till the last second to put that on, if you can. So I just use that same technique to clean up these water pipes as well as this lip to make the bypass hose actually seal as best as possible. I'm going to take some ultra gray, which we use on everything water related down here. Something else I learned lately having this thing, if you got a little clog tip from where it dried on your nozzle for your RTV, just blast it with some air, shoot that sucker out. So you're going to put about a 4mm bead all the way around this, basically just enough so when it squishes out that it's going to make a good seal. Some people are the smear type guys. I'm a squish type guy, so I put a bead, let the squish do the work. And we're going to hand tighten these in, let all the RTV squish out around the edge, wait about an hour, then we'll come back and torque it down. I believe it's 5 foot-pounds. I literally just do snug with my hands because I don't have a torque wrench that goes that low. And something else I have started doing lately with these pipes is I will put a little bit of RTV on the actual end of the pipe, like right here, all the way around, because most of these kids come with silicone hoses anymore, not rubber like they used to be, which were a lot thicker. So the spring clamps actually sealed a little bit better on the rubber, so I do it to help prevent any leakage using these silicone hoses. Watch for that bead to squish out around, and you can also look inside the pipe to make sure that it's squished out sufficiently. Now we'll set our timer for an hour. So we did go ahead, we beaded up our water pump so we can just install that, get it out the way. The one over here to the right of the uppermost one, it'll be below this timing plate. See, I always forget and goof up time to time, and it's okay. I've done this 100 times and I still make mistakes. Just make sure you got it sorted before you go putting everything together, and you're good. I love how zinced all these bolts are. It makes me happy. Clean them threads off. Gonna give one more wipe down on the water pump mating surface just to make sure it's all good and ready to go. I got some OCD when it comes to this part because I really hate redoing this. Dry it off some. And the reason I like doing this before I put the timing on is because once the timing belt's in the way, it's easy to kind of bump into it. We're just going to slowly walk it in. Basically, I just like doing 2 bolts, get them hand tight to where it's all snug, and then we can start hand threading these and do the same finger tight technique. But to put it on, I always skip one just to walk down the whole thing. Once you see it starting to squish, I stop. Now we're going to set a second timer for an hour and then come back and torque these down to 12 foot-pounds. I believe it's 12 to 15, but I always do the lower end of the spec just to be a little careful. And it does help as well to take your camera and do the same kind of thing, making sure you got a bead all the way around, at least where it squishes out. A little bit of peace of mind. Now we can put them cam gears on. Lubricate your exhaust cams a little bit with some oil. I know I said to do that earlier, but we're going to do it again just to help those gears come off nicely next time. These intake cam gears are doweled, so you can see you can spin it, but once it gets on the dowel, it's locked into place. You want to make sure that it's locked into place before tightening these down. You don't want to break a pin on your intake gear like Ryan ended up doing and be chasing a weird misfire or just bad running condition, because it can actually slip all the way and end up damaging your valves. And don't forget to pull off your O-rings because we are replacing them. These are also doweled as well, so you can put them on one way. Make sure that you don't put them on wrong, or else, like I said previously, you can cause damage to the inside of your engine. And we're going to tighten those down to 12 to 15 foot-pounds, and these intake cam gears will be 90 to 95. So basically this is the belt wrap technique. You wrap it around the cam gear to make all the teeth bite on the belt, and then I just take a couple vice grips and kind of clamp it down so the teeth cannot move in 2 different spots, and it's better to keep it as tight to the gear as possible. And then we got it wrapped around this idler pulley here at the bottom, and then over here on this alternator bolt. So basically if it does try to turn, the rest of the belt is pretty tight, and you really shouldn't have any problem getting that 90 to 95 foot-pounds. See, it tries to go, but it can't. Oh, forgot to reset my torque. We made it to 45 foot-pounds. And we got that 93 foot-pounds without twisting the gear over and without having to take the intake valve covers off. So the more you know. I'm these gloves' worst enemy. And to do the driver's side, we wrapped it around here, crimped it here as well as here, ran it back behind this idler pulley and put it back on the timing stud. So now both intake gears are tight and we are good to continue putting on our belt. I guess we actually need to do our VTC springs, O-rings, and covers first. Take your cover, make sure you got the right O-ring, and then just install them in the groove. Adding a little bit of oil down here into the groove will actually help them stay put. Especially if you spin it while it's in there, it's not going to fall out. A little tip to help keep it set. I always kind of put the Nissan upwards, at least in the most upward position, although it does not matter whatsoever. It's not like anyone's ever going to see any of this. Grab your VTC spring, place it in, and now compress that down while you finger tight 2 of your 7mm bolts in to hold the cap, and then I just walk it the rest of the way down once these guys are kind of secured into place. Second one's biting, so I don't have to hold on to it. And now these are like 1 foot-pound, literally just snug. Do not strip these things out. They are so small, it is so easy to do. Literally, like as soon as it stops spinning, I stop. So as I was mentioning earlier, I'm just going to clean out these silicone hoses, get them nice and clean. So basically, I can use a little bit of RTV to seal the difference in between the actual pipe and this itself. You can put it on the pipe itself. I'm just going to run and smear a little bead here around the inside of this and try to mitigate any potential leakage, because it's kind of in a spot you really don't want it to be where it's going to leak, because it just really sucks to get to. Since we did tighten these up already, just going to push that on until it goes on as far as it can. Now we're going to position our hose clamps down and out of the way, preferably like this, so that way they do not come in the way with the thermostat pipe or the upper coolant bypass pipe. I bought these little 90-degree pliers the other day, and I'm telling you what, I've used them so many times since. I am absolutely obsessed. So as you can see, we still got room to put our pipes on. They're out the way. So let's go ahead and move on with our timing belt. So when we install our timing belt, basically the biggest crucial thing that I can tell you guys is to count your belt teeth. It's going to be 24 in between these 2 timing marks, 45 between these 2, another 24, and then between here and your crank pulley is going to be 59 timing belt teeth. As long as you count them and they're all within the actual numbers, you're going to be good to go to install it on. So we're going to twist our gears over to top dead center, pretty much where the valves are open, so we can put our belt and everything together. So this dotted spot will always start over here on the passenger exhaust cam gear, and it'll go on like this. Now I did kind of reverse the crankshaft back just a little bit, basically so I can give it enough adjustment that once I get all of these lined up, that I can adjust the crank accordingly if needed. So once you come over here to the driver's side, if it doesn't line up perfectly, don't forget you can actually rotate this side about a tooth so you can get it right where you want it. Like this doesn't line up, so we'll twist it a little bit and make it line up. So we got to twist this over a little bit. Looks like we got to move this exhaust cam gear a little bit. You can do this by using an 11mm, just barely moving it over. So that lines up. Get this one lined up. Now we're going to wedge something in here to keep this stationary, and it helps to kind of lay something over top of that. Do not crimp or put any vice grips on that to hold it into place. Now since we got it where we can rotate the crank bolt a little bit, we got enough slack to kind of adjust appropriately to get this timing mark actually where it needs to be, which this one's always kind of tricky to see. So I always try to like line it up, then wedge something down here in the oil pump so it does not jump or move, and then get the camera out and check. So basically you can see a little bit of slack here in the belt now that everything is in the correct spot. We're just going to use the crank to kind of tighten everything up to pull out all that extra slack between these gears. Now we can take our timing belt tensioner, set it into place, and get it to kind of take up the rest of that slack. And we're going to hand tighten all of our hardware to kind of keep it in its own position, and then we can start messing with the tensioner to actually gap it. So now that everything's hand tight, we're going to actually tighten this stopper bolt on our tensioner till we can close the gap to about 2 millimeter, since our desired gap is 4 millimeter. Because as we tighten this up and then spin the engine over, we want to get 4 millimeters as it takes up the tension or the slack. Don't tighten it too fast. You can actually break the arm with the, pressure of the piston on the tensioner. So here's where I like to take a pry bar, something I've kind of started doing here recently, and I pry on the tensioner itself to move it where I want it, to kind of set the tension with this, and then to tighten those 2 bolts and nut down. Technically, you don't have to do the nut until you get the desired tension, so you can actually set it right. So basically, you're going for the perfect in-between of where to adjust the tensioner and put pressure on the tensioner when you tighten it to where it reads 4 mil. So now we're supposed to be waiting 5 minutes, but I want to show you this tensioner when we start to turn it over. See, it kind of jumped open. Well, we're going to turn it over half a rotation and get everything back to top dead center before we finish out the rest of the 5 minutes. It does help if you take your plugs out for this, because it makes the engine way easier to turn over. But right now it's looking like we're pretty close to being on the money first shot, which usually is pretty rare, but I've done this a few times, so I've kind of learned how to make that happen, so to speak. So now we're back about the top dead center. Let's grab our 4 mil, and if it fits in the gap, ooh, that's so close. You want to check this as soon as it turns over while it's taking up the slack, while you're simulating the engine actually running. Man, is that close. It fits, but not as comfortably as I'd like. So now that it's been 5 minutes, we're going to turn all of this over 720 degrees, and before we loosen the tensioner, if we have to, if we don't get our desired gap, we must set it to top dead center. If not, your valves are going to be trying to close. When that happens, it's going to be putting pressure on the belt, and it's not going to give the slack down to the tensioner. So now that we're there, we got our 4 millimeter Allen key, and it's slightly too tight, barely. So now, since it's at top dead center, we're going to tighten this stopper bolt back in. This time we're going to set it to about 3 millimeter, and then put the pressure on the tensioner about the same as it was. But since it's at top dead center, we don't have to worry about anything when we go to loosen it. It's going to stay in place. And you'll know when it's loose because your tensioner will start to move. Put the pressure back on the tensioner. Tighten our 12 mils. Now we're going to loosen that stopper bolt again. Wait 5 more minutes, and hopefully this time we'll see. Now that our 5 minutes are up, again, let's crank it over. Get our rotations in. Once we're back up to top dead center after our 720 degrees, let's take our 4 mil. A little too tight. Not too tight, but a little too big. Now I can spin it, but it catches as I spin it. So that tells me we're gonna have to tighten it pretty much a little bit more, probably 2.5 millimeters with that same amount of pressure on the tensioner, and try this one final time. So it's been another 5 minutes. We just turned it over, and that 4 millimeter fits in there perfectly. So the spec is technically 3.6 to 5.4, but 4 millimeters is that perfect sweet spot in between. So use that all at your own discretion. Now, one thing I will say, after you tighten the 2 bolts and 1 nut to 12 to 15 foot-pounds for the tensioner, pull out this 10 mil stopper bolt, because if this works its way out, falls down here behind the cover, it can cause you to skip teeth on the timing belt, and you don't want that to happen, trust me. So now that that's all set, we're going to take all of our timing covers, we're going to clean them up, slap them back on, so that we can get to the spot where we can install these coolant bypass hoses, our thermostat, and our thermostat housing. So we got all of our covers on. We hand tighten our crank pulley. Now we're going to tighten it down while it's in 5th gear to 165 foot-pounds. I believe the spec's like 159 to 175. So we're just going to go kind of in the middle. We got our wheels chalked so it does not roll forward. It'll move, but it's not going to roll forward. Sweet. Now for you auto guys, unfortunately you're gonna have to try to figure out a belt wrap technique, because I never really have luck. The highest I can get it to is like 130 foot-pounds, but I've never had one come off at 135 foot-pounds. I did also forget to mention the cast bracket is 12 to 15 foot-pounds. And really we can go ahead and plug our cast back in and get this re-secured down here. So next thing we're going to be doing are these coolant pipes, but I'm going to have to wait until I get back. I got to go change the fuel lines on my mom's lawnmower, and we've got a dinner with Gabby's cousin tonight that's in from Mexico. So we'll be back pretty soon. So now we're back and we're ready to get these pipes installed. We got them all cleaned up with the wire wheel. Mating surfaces are nice and clean, but it never hurts to go back one more time and wipe them with brake cleaner. We also cleaned all the corrosion off of these ends, so they seal the most optimally with the new hoses. Since we have new silicone hoses down here, I'm going to be putting a little bit of RTV on these as well, kind of like we did these little bypass hoses. And we're going to put some on this part as well to seal on them bypass hoses, because it's the worst spot to leak from. We also want to wipe up down here on that mating surface so we can make sure there is zero oil or grease. Tell me what you guys think about the hat setup, where you're at right now. If this is something I should maybe do a little bit in the future. I know it may be a little bouncy, at least it looks bouncy, but the stability control might take care of that. But you guys are ultimately going to be the one to let me know. This kind of helps you guys see kind of my position a little bit better. Sure, clean this spot up. All right, let's grab our ultra gray and set us some beads. We're going to put this thermostat in with this little bleeder spot up top, because if not, you'll have a hard time trying to bleed your coolant. It'll always try to blow back at you instead of drawing air down in. So I did go ahead and I took the wire wheel to these bolts and kind of cleaned all of the RTV out of the threads. Awesome. Trains never come through this town, but they are, of course, when I go to record. Basically here, your main priority is just getting these started inside of the coolant bypass pipes. Oh yeah, I guess I did it off camera, but make sure you get your other hose clamps on first, or else there's no way to get them on. I kind of overlap them on the other ones, so that way they open a little more and give you kind of more room to squeeze it on. Now we're going to hand tighten all of this in to get a nice squish, and then once we get it hand tight, we'll move those hose clamps back so then we can put this pipe on, and then we're going to wait an hour. Never fails. I always get it on something when I'm installing it. So always watch your water pump. And then the biggest obstacle is going to be getting these studs on, because it's real easy to kind of wipe all of your RTV out when doing this, or off, not out. And I do it till I can thread in the one hex head bolt, and I'll use that to kind of pull it all together so I know it's hand tight. And now I can install these washers, crush washers, and the nuts. Then we'll torque them all down to 12 to 15 foot-pounds once the time comes. So we waited an hour, we've torqued it down. Now we can actually go to install our water pump pulley and our fan clutch. I guess our fan as well. But basically I want to get these secured so as we tighten and install all of our belts that there's going to be no issues there. Ratcheting wrench, 10 mil is the best, and I did forget to mention we did hand thread each of these studs in using Loctite. Basically Loctite is an anaerobic sealant, and with the lack of oxygen present, it seals. So basically anywhere that it would run out would not actually dry, but it will dry in the thread area. We hand tightened all these, but now we're just going to snug them up with the wrench. So then once we get the actual belt on, we can fully tighten it down. Okay, so our longest one is going to go on first because that is the alternator. This alternator is being a little stubborn, so basically it's almost loose enough to get the belt on. So I get it where the belt started, and I crank the engine over to kind of pull it the rest of the way on. Next we've got the AC pulley, which is arguably the easiest one. And last but not least, power steering. Now once we have all our belts on and tightened, there is one thing that I really recommend to do while you're here. Now he bought both of these coolant temp sensors, one for the gauge and one for the ECU itself, which is this right here. If you do not have a blue plastic sensor, replace it for a new OEM one. These things can cause so many issues with cold starts, running weird when warm, or not starting when warm. You'll need a deep well 19 mil socket. And with this ECU side one, there's actually a crush washer that comes with it. Make sure that that is present when you go to reinstall. Now these are pipe threads, I'm about positive, but I've never had an issue with this one. I've never really replaced the actual gauge one because it rarely goes bad. I would say the crush washer seals this one, but we're going to put a little bit of Loctite on that one just to kind of seal them threads so we can just verify that nothing's going to leak. Torque spec's probably like 12 foot-pounds. I just go nice and tight. Not too tight because, again, it's aluminum threads and you really don't want to strip them out. A little bit goes a long way. We're just going to do a dab towards the bottom of the threads. Same thing there, nice and snug. Odds are they're not going to fit exactly in the same position as your old sensor. It just happens. Sometimes they're a little cockeyed. Now we can take our wiring harness and re-secure it back to the engine. Tuck it behind. Plug in our PTU and use our little tabs to secure it. Now this was zip tied to the upper radiator hose. Probably put it back where it was just because OEM. Since we tensioned our belts, we can actually throw our radiator back in and that should finish us up. There is one thing we're not going over, and that is setting ignition timing with your CAS, because we have to get the car up to temp. This video is about to go in and get edited, and these coolant pipes have like another 6 hours to cure before I can fully throw coolant back in this thing. So we just swapped out this lower radiator hose to a silicone one. Original's over here. So now we can reinstall this bad boy, and basically all we need to do is tuck that lower hose from the fan, so as it goes in, oh, we got to clean that up, that it doesn't get hung up. But thankfully it's easier to put in than it is to take out. So once that hose is tucked, it'll force its way past that radiator fan. I just got to make sure both of these on the bottom side are poking through those radiator mount grommets. Kind of like that, about guaranteed. Now we can go and install our radiator brackets. Same goes for this hose, but I'm going to do a little bit of RTV on this just to keep it from leaking. I feel like these silicone ones are kind of plagued with it. I don't know why they always send the twin turbo radiator hose. I just hope it works. I know it used to not work and it would be like super kinked. And usually I've never had an issue with the pipes actually sealing down here, kind of like I do down here on these aluminum pipes. Yes, we did put a little bit of RTV down here as well. I guess they started extending them, so now they work much better. They used to not work at all. And you don't want to go too tight on these if you do have normal hose clamps. I believe these should be spring clamps since it's, you know, a plastic fitting. 'Cause yeah, you go too tight, crunched. We re-secured this overflow hose down through here, so we can now reinstall it. Yes, another glove down the drain. Pretty much all that there is left to do is to fill this thing up with coolant, let it idle out, and yeah. I think we're going to be doing an injector conversion on this thing. We've got to order the injectors. We'll do the plenum line bypass, a couple other little odds and ends. I do need to still replace those rear spark plugs, but I'll do that once we take it all apart, so I only have to use our balance tube O-rings once. And we'll do an oil change too while we're in here. Now that's going to conclude our 120K POV timing kit video. I hope you guys kind of enjoyed this. Please let me know down below if this is something you guys are interested in the future. And also let me know, do you prefer the chest mount or the hat mount? Still don't know how I feel about either one of them, but I see a little bit of the hat mount, so I can see that it's kind of a better position and whatnot for, you know, to see. I do apologize for anything previously where you couldn't see because I'm aimed too far downwards. Maybe that's something we'll have to keep in mind so we can use over here like on Carl's Z, and basically so you guys are kind of just right here directly in line with it. So yeah, please let me know down below what you guys think, and if you guys need to know how to set ignition timing or you need any more in-depth videos, go check out like my other 3 or 4 timing videos. And I also have a short, I think it's like my first or second short on how to set ignition timing on a VG. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe down below, as it helps out the channel, helps you guys stay tuned for more content, and helps us grow in the end. Thank you guys again, and until next time, peace.